Richmond. Another long day at the office was ending. The sun had already set, and there was a hullabaloo on the streets. Autumn had begun, and it was the perfect temperature to be hanging out with friends. Despite this, Richmond Pager was quietly shuffling past the crowds, desperate to get inside his home. He moved swiftly past the young folks who were dressed flamboyantly, trying not to choke on the strong smell of aquanet that wafted through the air. Once he set eyes on the door to his flat, he sped up, closing the door behind him. He breathed a sigh of relief. These kids blocking the path all the time, just standing around, should be working a job instead of making a mess of the neighbourhood, Richmond grumbled to himself. The neighbourhood used to be quiet, but in the past few years, the area supposedly had been revitalised, as the newspapers called it. This brought clubs and shops, and with it, the type of people who wasted their money on those things. Richmond sighed again as he walked to his kitchen, just as he did every night after work. Standing over the fridge, he pulled out a microwavable dinner. No home-cooked meal awaited him. Richmond had studied and outsmarted many people, eventually making it to the C-suite with the popular pharmaceuticals brand. He spent his long days reviewing research and translating this into simple terms for his company and the public. However, this came at the cost of a wife and family. The beep of the microwave imposed into his internal focus. He placed his dinner on the table facing his front window, which was illuminated by a street lamp just outside. Before seating himself, he went over to the only piece of tech in a flat otherwise filled to the ceiling with books. Richmond ran his fingers over the top of his beloved hi-fi record player. He was about to start the player when he heard a boisterous laugh from outside. It caught his attention more than usual. "Do they have to be so loud?" Richmond asked to himself. "What could be so funny that they have to disturb everyone else's evening just to muck about?" His trail of thought continued. Realizing he had left his window slightly open, slightly ajar, Richmond stalked over and shut it before sitting down to methodically consume his dinner. He glared at the group just outside his front garden fence. Young men and women dressed so you don't know who is who. Not that they were dressed very manly to begin with. Richmond's inner monologue continued. Everyone wearing enough makeup to look like a slag. Colours that make it look like a rainbow drop from the sky on them. Richmond examined each person in the group like he would in the lab, and these youths were his subjects, closely staring at each of them. One character stood out to Richmond. He stared intently through the window at them as they used a motorbike's mirror to touch up their bold pink lipstick. This person made Richmond freeze in his chair. The person stood up and stared right into the window that Richmond was sitting in, and there was a brief moment of eye contact between the two. It was in this moment Richmond began to flash back to a memory from his youth. He was under some kind of hypnosis from the lipstick, it seemed. This memory had come up more and more recently, ever since the area had been revitalised and the so-called new romantics started to roam about. Richmond had tried to bury this memory over the years. When Richmond was a young boy, he would watch his mother get ready every day. This was many years ago, a different era to the one of excess he lives in now. Despite the war having just ended and supplies still low, his mother was proud of her looks and made sure to dress and put on makeup every day. She was a good seamstress too, and had repurposed many hand-me-downs to look fashionable. Rich's mother always chose something colourful to wear. These bright outfits made all the neighbours smile as they ran their errands. One day, the doorbell rang, just as his mother was finishing dressing. Richmond loved how his mother's bright outfits brought joy to others. He wanted to join in and bring that same joy. Richmond crept over to his mother's vanity desk. Her lipstick was still out, a beautiful shade of pink. His small hands carefully grabbed the tube. He traced his lips. He was not perfect, and he had trouble staying in the lines of his smile. He admired his look in the mirror. Seeing his lips bright pink brought joy to himself. Then his mother came back into the room. She stopped quite suddenly at the sight of her son. "Richie, darling, you take that off now. You look like a twit with Mummy's lipstick on," she scolded. Despite not raising her voice, Richmond could tell that Mother was displeased. She rarely got displeased, which made this displeasure seem worse. He felt the heat of embarrassment rise from his heart into his cheeks, and tears welled up in his big doe eyes. "Don't cry. Let me get you a towel," Mother continued. Once she got a towel, she sat Richmond on her lap and began to wipe the lipstick off his face. "You can't wear that, love. People will think you're some sort of nutter. Just to think how silly that would be. My boy wearing lipstick. No, it just won't do," she continued. Richmond tried to keep the tears from falling down his cheeks, as he did not want to make Mother more upset. Once the lipstick was gone, Richmond was allowed to continue playing. Meanwhile, back in the present, that feeling of embarrassment crept up on Richmond's face again, snapping him back into the moment. "I can't have this," he muttered to himself as he stood up from his chair. Turning on his hi-fi player, Claire de Lune began to play over the speakers. The beautiful sound of Debussy soothed Richmond. The music drowned out the repeating line in his memory. "You look like a twit with Mummy's lipstick on," rang over and over in his head as he filled a glass full of red port wine. Mother's voice then began to fade as Richmond sipped, continuing his dinner. He ate quietly, trying not to look at the people outside too much. He spent the rest of the evening listening to his music and reading before going to bed. With his simple life and career awaiting him in the morning.